The Author versus the Werewolf. A Mutant Ideas production by Bill Couture and Chris Marti. Original music by Cosmic Monster.
A while later. It looked like it didn't know what to do with its hands. From the front window of my cabin, I watched the werewolf grow bolder every night. Sometimes it sat there in the dark like a dog, staring at me through the trees. Sometimes it was nothing but the small sounds of feet on dried leaves outside scurrying by. Sometimes it was the beast. Other times, the man. More often, I caught it transitioning between the two. Like some deranged fan, it stalked and loitered around my property. Damned, at play, its desperate need to interact mounting, interest increasing. No matter its intent, whenever it finally decided to break the ice, it would not be good. Every night I could feel its loneliness out there and detested the thing for making me imagine it. I poured myself a stiff drink. One of us soon, I knew, would be killed by the other. I tried not to imagine being eaten by a sad human-animal hybrid, but it was hard not to. We'd been neighbors, though I didn't know for how long. I'd lost track of things.
Psst.
A familiar tapping at the window. It was the squirrel, back again.
You're wrong about everything,
It said.
You've no idea what's really happening out there. I've been seeing some crazy shit.
Its little squirrel face waited for me to catch up.
There are more spirits in these woods than there are trees. It kills its victims, but only to have more company to torture it.
The squirrel's little eyes open wide.
This is its home. It's the devil. It's coming for you tonight.
I watched the little squirrel pause for emphasis before scurrying from the roof to the tree branch and then disappearing into the foliage. The rising sun cast an orange-pink glow onto the already colorful, jittering leaves. I slung the crossbow over my shoulder along with a dozen arrows punching their way through my now unsalvageable duffel bag and hiked the path that I'd heard the werewolf go on the night of our first face-to-face meeting. There was a comfort in knowing that thing was out there with a clear motivation. The squirrel confirmed it. This just wasn't my imagination or the isolation for... how long has it been? Was it really that comforting? Was a fact so hard to come by that I clung on to the ghastly notion? My wandering thoughts came to a stop before the more treacherous and mountainous terrain. The breeze carried something foul. It wasn't just a scent. There was something off in the vibrations carried with it. I must be on the right track. I just couldn't follow actual tracks anymore. I had to rely on my nose and good old-fashioned instinct from here. The slick, rocky climb was full of near tumbles and full-on collisions of skin to stone. A miasma of dread slowly enveloped me from head to toe. A dirt path poured from the entrance to a sizable cave. Well, shit is getting real after all, I said to the echo in the cave ahead. Nature, again with its sense of humor, prodded me with a mischievous wink and smile. The air inside of the cave was thick with the smell of carrion. The dark, damp, miserable void stared into my eyes as they teared up from the sheer intensity of the stench. Why would I bring a flashlight? Hell, why would a werewolf live in a cave other than to fulfill its duty as a highly illogical monster with inconsistent folklore? With a rubbery squeak, my left boot betrayed me and sent me into the cave wall. My hand shot out to brace the fall, which it did with an equally memorable squelch that wriggled in my fingers. Maggots. I pushed away from the wall and shook my hand, wiping the slimy, wriggling creatures off on anything and everything I could reach. If I had discovered the damn thing's lair, what exactly was I supposed to do now? Yell obscenities until it decided to walk up and greet me with a wave? Well, that actually did work the first time. "Hey, asshole!" I taunted as I readied the crossbow. The cave and whatever was inside dismissed the insult and continued its silent treatment. Alright, maybe it was high time to see exactly what was in there. I pushed the hair out of my face and wiped off my glasses, just barely remembering to use the non-maggot hand. With nervousness in each step, I inched into the maw of the foul place. The smell, Dear God, the smell just kept getting worse. If this wasn't the werewolf's lair, it might have been its toilet. My eyes started to adjust as the outside light began to dim behind me. Jagged and misshapen sticks lined one side of the cave wall, stacked in obtuse heaps of questionable grime. The cave was curving downward and leftward and threatened to cut off the remaining light if I went much further. It was then I caught sight of a specific shape atop another pile of anomalous matter that brought the horror of everything around me into focus. The top half of a human skull was perched and grinning on a heap of glistening viscera and bone. This wasn't the werewolf's den or its toilet. It was the hairy bastard's dumpster. "Oh, fuck this," were the only words that came to mind to blurt out before I vomited my breakfast, coffee, and apparently last night's dinner onto the mutilated human remains. I wished I'd averted my eyes when I saw a glistening, undigested fragment of macaroni drip onto a partly chewed large intestine. Crossbow or not, this wasn't the time or place for a showdown. I was getting out of this awful stinking place. I had no plans to become a permanent resident. I returned to the cabin to fight another day, and more importantly, to wash my fucking hands.
The werewolf, crouched in the darkness of the cave, looked on as the vomiting man fled, its bulging eyes fixed on the empty space where he once stood, a trail of drool forming a lake around the werewolf's matted feet.
Another retreat to the illusion of safety indoors. I was manic. This wasn't supposed to be how animals act. They don't leave their food half-eaten without a damn good reason. The werewolf that eats people that hadn't decided to bust into my cabin for hors d'oeuvres, only to torment me for the last... How long has it been? I shook out the thought and muttered the absurdity aloud to myself. The werewolf that is going to eat me. Well, maybe part of me. A while later. These woods aren't big enough for the both of us.
The werewolf watched as the tiny shadow paced in the tiny room of the tiny cabin on the tiny yard in the forest. His forest. The mangy lunatic scratched the back of its ear with cracked and overgrown fingernails. Its hands wriggled and writhed. Its tail beat a rhythm against the desiccated bark of a nearby tree. Its jaw hung open, trumpeting something between a snarl and a snore with each inhale, and something between a low growl and a belch with each exhale. Flecks of drool dripped and hung from the werewolf's distended lower lip and collected on the creature's hands. No conscious thought passed through its warped mind. This was an abomination following instinct, and a choir of whispered voices cheering and jeering it from beyond the void. There was then one final voice that pushed the werewolf into action. The last thread keeping the mad beast at bay snapped like a frayed leash. The werewolf stomped steadily towards the cabin on its distorted mammalian feet.
I froze in place. Those are steps, just as the squirrel predicted. The realization outside was more than I bargained for. I ran to the window and cupped my hands around my eyes to block the obstructing reflections from the fireplace. The werewolf froze mid-step. Eye contact was shockingly quick. It had just crossed the tree line and was barely illuminated by the moonlight. A cloud of crimson and amber leaves it kicked up lulled back and forth in the air, frozen in a moment of shared acknowledgement. The werewolf transformed before my eyes and again waved to me. A morbid revelation crept up my spine until it overflowed from the back of my mind. It was the worst thing I'd ever seen, a master's portrait of isolation. It was the destination at the end of the road. I saw in the werewolf my future if I did not find an exit, turn off, and turn off soon. It waved to me. What did that feel like? Why did it feel like this? I couldn't think. I backed away from the window and suddenly saw the faintest blurry reflection of myself over the monster at the tree line. When was the last time I saw myself in a mirror? I panicked and rushed to go find one. What I saw in it was an image that shouted zero maintenance. I had never wanted a clean shave as badly in my life as I did in that moment, to distance myself as far away from that hairy abomination out there in the dark as possible, to feel maintained. But there was no razor or shaving cream for miles. I looked at my arms. The little hairs on them seemed to dance and grow. I wanted to throw up, because I'd realized then to my horror. I waved to the thing first.
The werewolf cocked its head at the frantic author in the cabin. A guttural sound erupted from its throat, followed by a gobbing of saliva that expelled along the side of its cheek and soaked a tuft of tangled fur on the inside of the beast's arm. The game of red light, green light was over. The werewolf began sprinting towards the cabin. Its arms hung low, its excitement visible like a dog that stood up to run towards its owner.
All I heard was the low rustling of leaves, and in the next instant the monster slammed against the front door unceremoniously with a huge thud. I ran to brace it, but the whole thing blasted off its hinges with the beast's second attempt and knocked me on my ass. I looked up into its eyes, and the world bled out something technicolor. It was smiling, but the expression didn't reach its eyes in any way.
Kick its ass!
The little squirrel shouted from the corner.
That son of a bitch murdered my whole family. They're all damned. Trapped in a hell of its own design.
I suddenly felt the company of the dead surrounding me, the spirits of the damned whispering in my ears, all pouring in through the open door behind it. If that devil won this fight, I'd be on that other side with them, right after being torn to shreds and eaten. I came out here to rediscover horror, which literally had just busted down my front door. Was I its victim or its master? It was time to put the bad dog down. We both spotted the crossbow between us. I saw an opportunity. It smelled a nuisance. I reached for the weapon but was cut off by the werewolf's foot coming down in front of me and onto it. I fell backward to avoid the massive humanoid paw. I shuffled backwards across the floor until I felt my elbow scrape against the brick ledge of the fireplace. I grabbed a poker from the set and leapt at the werewolf, stabbing it down its throat. I yanked it out with a twist and stabbed it again, a second time under its jaw. The fire poker exploded up through its right eye cavity and remained inside until the beast pulled it out. Not missing a beat, I grabbed a half-full canister of kerosene in one hand and lit a piece of wood from the fireplace in the other. I doused the thing's head and shattered the log lamp over its snout. It caught fire, staggered, and eventually fell. I used this opportunity to grab my next weapon, a cast iron frying pan. I looked down and the werewolf was snickering like a rabid Scooby-Doo. I started wailing on its face with the pan until all of its teeth were either knocked out or broken to pieces, and its snickers drowned in its own blood.
You can't kill werewolves with frying pans, you idiot.
Something whispered in my ear. I watched as time appeared to move backwards. The visceral damage began to undo itself before my very eyes. The beast's fangs scooted back into its shattered jaw, which rehinged and sucked back in all of the spattered blood and bits of brains from the floorboards. Its vacant dog-like face panted as if it was waiting to resume a game of fetch. Soon, another voice said, "You'll help us torture it in our way. But first, you have to wait until the boss gets bored. He'll slash and eat some of you. Then your soul will slip away and get trapped in its gravity with us. We were all lost in the woods once, just like you." I hated how plain it all sounded, this itinerary of the damned.
Your typewriter!
The squirrel interrupted from the corner.
Tune out the damned! Use your words!
I nodded. The little guy was a solid tag team partner. The werewolf blocked my only exit from the cabin, and the carpet beneath me was beginning to catch fire from the discarded log. I made a break for the staircase, but the werewolf grabbed me by the ankle and started slamming me around the cabin like a rag doll. Bones seemed to be breaking. Cracking and popping sounds coincided with every hit. The spirits seemed delighted in my pain. They'd all been there at one time, and were too deep within its hell to imagine or wish anything different for anyone. The werewolf screamed and howled as it danced with its captive partner. The small fire had grown to a roaring blaze, bathing the room in red. "Easy there, buddy," one of the damned spirits told me. "The devil is almost done." But I didn't hear it. I was already out cold. "You've been out here quite a while." I looked at the wolf. It was very elegant sitting in that armchair. The wolf stared at me. Isolation doesn't give you a clear head. It just fills it up with more junk. I felt like I was being subjected to some abusive therapy here. "You been seeing anything unnatural? Aware of anything weird in the woods?" I nodded, quite aware of something very unnatural. "Yes," I responded. "I am aware, wolf." The wolf squinted at me. "A werewolf, huh? No, I tried shaking my head. The son of a bitch was twisting my words. Or was he? I looked down at my hands, but they were paws. Loneliness is an open invitation to outer forces, the wolf said. You best reclaim yourself before the devil finishes his work. I looked back at the wolf in the chair, but it was just a little squirrel. My eyes snapped open just in time for me to roll out of the way of the werewolf's snapping jaws. Instead of flesh and bone, its teeth bit through and tore the coffee table to splinters. I sprinted toward the exit, but the werewolf was too fast. It was already back on its feet, hunched and drooling in the broken doorway. No, not this time. Its clawed hand lunged for me, and I dodged right, taking off up the staircase. Blood dripped from a dozen cuts, and I winced and shuddered with every step. Hand over hand, I pulled myself up toward the bedroom. Behind me, I heard the werewolf let out a frustrated bark, followed by booming, flat-footed stomps across the kitchen and up the stairs, closing in quick. The vile creature's claws caught my shirt, missing my skin by inches. I slipped and stumbled the last few feet and into the typewriter. With every goddamn bit of strength and hope left in me, I picked up the ornate typewriter and swung it backward at the werewolf. A trail of paper followed the deadly word processor as it struck the beast square in the mouth. Stunned, the werewolf stared blankly at me. At this point, I was in no mood to show mercy toward this damn thing that haunted me night after night, and killed that little squirrel's family. 3 of the glistening keys were embedded in the creature's face, drawing tiny fountains of black-red blood. I locked eyes with the foul monstrosity, raised the typewriter again, and brought it down onto the werewolf's snout with a deafening smack that sent it careening down the staircase. I heaved and panted, blood from a gash in my forehead coating the lenses of my broken glasses. I peered down the stairs, fully expecting the werewolf to be up and coming after me again. Instead, I saw only the creature's foot, twitching on the kitchen floor. I slowly descended the stairs, typewriter in hand, the only effective weapon against this living nightmare of teeth and fur. There it was, on its back in a pool of its own blood. It violently twitched and spasmed, trying to get back into the fight. Its round, unblinking eyes were locked on me, but it didn't seem so imposing in this state. Even more of the typewriter keys were embedded in its skull. It clicked, silver keys. I couldn't believe I'd missed the composition of the unnecessarily ornate detail of the word processor. Silver bullets, not frying pans, kill werewolves. These weren't bullets, but this werewolf certainly didn't follow the rules any more than something that isn't supposed to exist would under any circumstances. I wasn't going to question the twist of fate at this point. I inched around its twitching claws and stood over the werewolf. It almost seemed confused about what it did to deserve such violent retaliation. I looked down at it and wondered if it understood anything I could say. I went to speak, but found I had nothing to vocalize, only managing to grit my teeth and respond with a shrug. The werewolf looked right back up at me and let out one final groan before I bashed the typewriter into it over and over again. With a 4th and final strike, I dropped what was left of the typewriter onto the splintered remains of the front door and looked down. It wasn't moving. Everything from keys to the ink ribbon, even the piece of paper trapped inside, was embedded into the werewolf. The twitching and writhing were gone. It lay still at my feet. The fire behind me engulfed the living room. Flames danced up the walls and onto the ceiling. A file of blood-splattered pages were scattered between the werewolf and the stairs, the sum total of my creative accomplishments during my stay. I gathered the pages and dropped them onto the prone body of the werewolf before setting them on fire with the leg of what was once my coffee table. For what it was worth, I wasn't sure the story was very good anyway. I looked around for the little squirrel for some guidance, but quickly realized I was alone in the burning cabin and limped outside.
To be continued. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe at Mutant Ideas, www.mutantideas.com. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, you are not alone with your thoughts. This has been a Mutant Ideas production of The Author versus the Werewolf. Story by Bill Couture and Chris Marti. Narrated by Marti and featuring Lina Dunn as the Squirrel. Original music by Cosmic Monster. The Author versus the Werewolf Illustrated Storybook and Soundtrack Cassette Tape coming soon.